Hi, I'm Robert Joseph. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use one of your blind hem stitches. It will be the number 12 on your dial here, and that will be for woven fabrics. Now, there is another stitch here for blind hemming, which is number 14, and that is used for knit fabrics. I was originally going to have both of those in the same video, but what I found after shooting them is that that would make a video over an hour long because of the way that I chose to show you what I'm doing with these stitches. So in this video, I'm going to do the blind hem twice. So I'm going to do it on a straight piece of fabric, and then I'm also going to create a pseudo pant leg and show you how it works working with the cylinder and the free arm sewing of this machine. I'm also going to show you the overcast stitch in this video, which is number 15. And that is used to finish the seam edges once you're done sewing. I do compare it with a zigzag stitch to finish the edge of the seam allowance, and the zigzag is actually what I prefer rather than the overcast stitch on the machine. And that's just a personal preference. I'm not crazy about the way the overcast stitch looks for the seam allowance finishing, and that's just personal. So now let's get right into working with the blind hem stitch. Okay, so there is just some preparation you need to do for the fabric with the fabric for the blind hem stitch, and this actually goes for both the woven and the knit also, although I'll be showing both. So here I've just prepared this fabric, and we're just going to do a straight stitch with a long stretch of straight fabric. So I've pressed up the hem and I've overlocked the edge. I've also, because this is really lightweight, and if you remember me saying it's always a good idea to sew with 2 layers of fabric, especially if you have a lighter weight. So what I've done is I've just kind of put a little piece of interfacing along the inside of the hem allowance. And then I've overlocked the edge to clean finish it. You don't have to do that for your practice, but I thought that it would help us gauge where we need to put the stitches. So again, I've pressed it up, and I've pressed up about 1 inch. And whenever you use this the blind hem function or the stitch, you're going to need to press up your hem allowance first. So now that I've got it pressed up, and we're going to call this the wrong side because we've pressed this up. Basically, we're going to call this the inside of the garment. Press it up to the inside of the garment. And what you want to do is I'm going to flip this over. So this would be the right side or the face side of the garment, and the hem is now underneath. And what we need to do is we're going to pull the fabric, the garment fabric or the outside, back away from that hem allowance. So the hem allowance is still here, but we're going to keep it folded. We want to keep it folded this way, and we're just going to roll this back away from the hem allowance. So now we see the inside of the hem allowance, and we want to gauge or judge how much of the hem allowance we're going to be catching. And if you watch the first videos, the stitches, and this should be in the 12 through 17 stitches, you saw that it stitched, and I'm using my pointer here, it will stitch 3 stitches, and then it will jump over like a zigzag, and then jump back, and then 3 more stitches, and then jump over. And that jump over is where it's going to catch the fabric of the body of the garment. Okay, so here we need to know where those stitches are going to stitch onto the actual hem allowance. Okay, so now one thing I've noticed that things are pulling out, and it keeps catching on my pointer here. What you could do to help you so you don't fold over too far away from your hem allowance is, I'm going to grab my pins here because we're going to use these anyway. You could come along and just pin along the very edge of that hem, as long as it won't damage your fabric. To keep that crease, that's where your the final hem allowance is, or hem on your garment. And then fold this back. And if we fold it back, it'll only go so far, you know, to those pins. So I'm going to suggest, and I have my ruler, that you fold your garment fabric back so you see just a 1/4 inch of your hem allowance, but no more. All right. And I've overlocked this here. So it's basically a 1/4 inch. So what I can do is fold my fabric to that overlock edge stitch. Now, if you fold it back not enough, what's going to happen is your stitches, your straight stitches will be here, and then it will jump over here, and then you will have all this extra fabric that you might catch if it's a pant hem or a top hem. So you don't really want a lot of extra fabric that it's not catching. So I'm going to fold this over and make sure everything stays nice and flat. Now, I know, so let me continue my sentence here. So I'm folding the fabric back just to the edge of the overlock stitch, because that's about a 1/4 inch. You can do less, but understand that the stitch from the 3 stitches and then over is just shy of a 1/4 inch. It may be just a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. So I guess that would be 3/16. But I'm going to finish kind of pinning here a section of this so you can see it. Now I'm going to also do this with the knit fabric. If you remember, there is a knit blind hem, which is more of a zigzag stitch. Okay, and that's all that's catching in the camera. Okay, so I have this pinned, and that's where it's going to go. Now, if you've pinned underneath here to hold the straight edge of the bottom of the garment, I'm going to unpin those because our presser foot needs to be able to go across the fabric without a problem. So now I know you're going to want to press this and press it in place, but if you do that, once we fold this back after the hem, you'll be left with a crease line. And sometimes once you press it one way, it doesn't like to press out. So I'm going to advise against that. All right, so now that I've got this pinned the proper way I need it to lay, I'm going to take it over to the machine and we will get this stitched. Okay, so we're ready to stitch in place this blind hem that we've got prepared now, and I'm just going to pull the camera back a little bit so you can see where I have my dial set, and it's at the 12 mark. So this is for wovens, and it's matching the notch up here. So let's come back down to, let's see if I can get a little bit closer so you can see. All right. Okay, so now we have this pin. We're going to need to remove these pins definitely as we go. And we have our finished edge. Let's see if it's falling out of my hands here. Finished edge here on this side, and the fabric is turned back, and would be the inside of the garment. And when we put this into the machine, of course, on just a straight piece, I want to get it in here further because I don't want to backstitch. So I'm not sure about backstitching on these stitches because as I'm going to do in the next part of the video is actually do the blind hem like it's a pant hem, which would be a circle. And so we would just stitch over that to secure it. So I'm going to push it in till probably about here and then not backstitch. And for the sample, if you just want to close it off, I would come back and just kind of do a straight stitch after you fold it back. Anyway, let's get this into the machine. And what I'm going to do is on this regular machine, there is this little slot here. You see that, the little slot here? That is where I'm going to line up this folded edge of the fabric. And I know that the zigzag over will actually catch the fabric. Now you can fine tune this after you get used to using this stitch if you'd like, of course, to get it even closer right here on the edge, because the idea Of course, on a industrial, I want to focus that. The idea is to get it right here, right on this, right in that fold where you're just catching one of the yarns in the weave. So on an industrial blind hem machine, that's all it catches. We get them tuned up so that's all they catch. So you can't really see the stitch on the outside. Now when I get done, you're going to be able to see the stitch on the outside because I'm using red thread. So, and it's a little bit more than I like to see. But if you're working with thread that is exactly the same color, you may not be able to see it. So again, I'm going to push this in. I'm lining up this where I've kind of pinned it, the folded edge here, into that slot area. And I probably got it about a 1/2 inch past the needle. I'm going to reach back here and push the presser foot down. In this case, I'm putting the presser foot down before I put the needle down. All right, and I'm going to take this pin out. Now let me just make sure that the camera is focused on that. So I'm going to ride this folded edge of the fabric here that I've got it up to the serger edge. This is 1/4 inch. So if you need to draw a line, if you didn't overlock or zigzag this here or put interfacing, that's fine. I would mark your 1/4 inch in so you know that's where to fold your fabric to. Maybe I don't think I said that in the previous part. So I'm actually lining up this folded edge here, which is the actual garment, to this slot. Now I'm going to put the needle down with the hand wheel, and it's hitting way over here. And you'll see once we get going why I say at least 1/4 inch, because the needle needs to stitch straight stitches on this side, and then it's going to come over to grab the fabric over here. You couldn't see mine. It's going to do stitches here and then come over and grab the fabric here and then back here. And you need to make sure that there's enough fabric over this side that the needle catches that. All right, whoops, I'm sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. And I'm following right here again, this edge right into that slit on the foot right here. And I'm just letting the machine do its thing. I'm not really looking at the needle at all. I'm just, that folded edge is just going right through here in this slot. I'm going kind of fast now. Now, I did say you could fine tune this because catching it here in the slot may be too much fabric for you, but I'm just letting you know, especially if you're a beginner, this is a good eye line for you to have when you're doing this blind hem. So make sure that roll gets in that slot here. Now when I'm coming up to the end, I'm not going to backstitch either. I'm just going to finish close to the end. And I'm going to do one more stitch here and bring the needle all the way back up. Take this out, cut, okay? So this is what it looks like. It looks like I missed some here. It looks like I missed some here, so maybe I wasn't paying attention to that. Maybe I was kind of talking, and that will happen. Okay, so I probably didn't get right into that slot. It must have kind of rolled over this way. All right, so I'm going to push the machine away so we can have a look at this on the table. So this is what it looks like here, but if I fold this back over to the front, the outside, now this is what it looks like. And you may have to just kind of finger press that fabric away. Kind of has a little bit of a crease here. Okay, and then I would go ahead and press it. So this was what it looks like on the inside now. And then if you want to have a look, whoop, there we go, look between the two and understand that it's just catching that little bit of fabric. Okay, and you may not be able to get away from these little lines because of the diagonal of the zigzag. So just be aware of that. Okay, so that is for the woven. Okay, so now we're ready to work with the blind hem as if it were like a pant hem. So I'm going to sew these seams, these two pieces of fabric, like it were a pant. And I'm going to actually sew the seam. And I didn't, on the previous sample, we just did the straight long piece working with the blind hem stitch. And I overlocked the edge with my overlocker instead of using the overlock stitch. So that's what I'm going to do with this. So you can see what the overlock stitch looks like. So I'll do the overlock stitch on one side, and then the other side I will press, and I will do I will do just a zigzag stitch, just so you can see the difference. Okay, so now on a pant leg, generally both sides are pressed open. A lot of times they are not, but I'm going to go ahead and press them both open and then do the overlock stitch. The overlock stitch is on the LX3817, not my overlocker machine, because I want you to see me using that in a practical sense. And then on the other side, I'm going to press it open again and just use a zigzag, and I'm going to show you the difference. So that's what I will do for this seam. So I'm going to get this pinned up so I have this side pinned, and you'll notice that this one piece, this top piece, is shorter or more narrow than the back because on a regular pant, your front is more narrow than the back. So I'm just going to pull this over here, get this lined up, and I'm going to stitch, put this pin just to get this in place. Then what I'm going to do is I will press up the hem, and then I'll put the interfacing. Now, you know, this is just a sample, and the reason I'm doing the interfacing is to give it a little body for my stitches, and that's why I put the interfacing on it. So just be advised, now this is the first time, other than the straight stitches samples, that we're using the straight stitches to create a seam. And I'm going to go ahead and use a 5/8 seam allowance. So I will mark that off on the sewing machine before I do that, and I'll walk you through that again. So I'm going to use 5/8 instead of a 1/2 inch because 5/8 is what is most commonly used in commercial patterns. Okay, so I'm going to get these all sewn up, and then I'll put the interfacing across the hem amount, and I will press it up. Okay, so I have the seams. Let me pull back on the camera just a little bit so we have a little bit more viewing space. Okay, so I have the seams pressed open, and I'm going to start this with the number 15. Let me just show you where I've got that so you can see. Yikes. Okay, so 15, this is the stitch we're going to use. Marked it here with the notch. So this is considered the overcast or overlock stitch. Again, I'm not sure how well this will work. I really prefer zigzag. But now on pants, again, I said I was going to pull back. Okay, so on pants, you know, on slacks, the seams are pressed open, but this stitch may work better if you did not press it open, if you just had the seam like this and then stitched. So what I'm working with is a single layer, so we will see how that works out. I don't really want to loosen the tension, but since we're pretending this is a slack and it's pressed open, you might find that if you do it like this, keep the seam flat and then stitch, the stitch might work a little bit better. Now, the zigzag, there is a zigzag on it, and the point comes over this way. So I like to keep that here right at the edge. I don't want it to really come over, because what that usually does is pulls the fabric, and then you get when you press it on the outside, sometimes it can look funny. So I'm going to start here, and I'm not going to backstitch just because of the style of the stitch that it is. So I'm going to kind of get this lined up. I'm going to take it back here. Once we get it started, we will see, whoops, sorry about that. We'll see where the stitch likes to go. Put the needle down, and then I'm going to put the presser foot down. And let's stitch and see how it goes. Okay. So, can you see that? So this is what it looks like. It is buckling here. So I'm going to loosen the tension up just, sorry I keep hitting the camera, just I think to maybe the halfway between 4 and 3. Let's see what that looks like since it's just a single layer. I'm trying not to let that notch get past this fabric, the cut edge. And I'm gonna go ahead and just sew through. Okay, let me bring that needle up. Let's see what this looks like. Whoa. Okay, so we started here at this end, and then it was buckling here. So I loosened the tension and that to the halfway a little bit, and that helped a little bit. We loosened it up to about a 3.5, but down here I think maybe I went too fast and it just kind of buckled in. So we might need to go kind of slow, but also I think how we're putting the fabric in here. And let me do this, and let me just go ahead and align the fabric up with the edge here. I know that seems like kind of far in, but it seems like when it gets close to this edge, it really kind of pulls some of this in. So I want to get away from that. So I'm just lining the fabric up to the edge of the foot. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So I think maybe having it too close to the edge is kind of what was causing some of this buckling, because it wasn't on the feed dog under here. Okay, so I'm not crazy about that stitch, so let's do a regular zigzag, and I'm going to switch this over to, see, I'm going to switch it to the 5B, which is in between whoops, no, I'm not going to do that. That's the satin stitches. I'm sorry. I'm going to try the 3 and see how that looks. I think the 2 might be too small. And I'm still at the 3.5 point on my tension. Okay, so I think too much tension will cause it to buckle on a single layer of fabric. All right, I'm not going to backstitch on this either, just because it's the single layer. And I'm going to line up the fabric just inside of the edge of the foot. Let me show you. I think if I can align it with this line here where the edge of the feed dog is, that might work. So it's just under the edge of the presser foot. That needle all the way up. Okay, so this is a zigzag finish, and I think I kind of like this better, even though it does buckle a little bit here, just because, I mean, it's up to you. It's just personal preference. Let's look at the 2 here. I'm not crazy about really wide zigzag as a finish, just because I worry about still some of the things coming out. But if you don't like the zigzag, you can also do just a straight stitch. So I'm going to finish the other side. And of course, if you go into the Apparel Arts Academy, level 1 sewing. I show you all kinds of edge finishes you can do without an overlock machine. So I'm just going to finish up this edge. Okay, so that's a zigzag. So I think I prefer the zigzag rather than this overlock stitch. I just feel like this overlock stitch makes the fabric a little bit inconsistent for pressing, but of course it's up to you. Now a lot of you might say, why aren't you way over here to the edge? Again, I really don't like putting the stitches close to this edge because it will pull the fabric in. If you like it closer to the edge, what I would do is I would trim a little of this off here. But I think that's good, especially for 5/8. Now remember, if you do either of these finishes, if you have to let out your seams, if you grow, unfortunately, some of us do sometimes, and you need to let out those seams, you're going to have to rip these out. So you don't want to get too close to this seam, otherwise you're going to have a problem with that edge finish. Okay, so just a little food for thought. So now I'm going to go ahead and prepare one of these sides for a hem. Okay, so I'm ready to work on this fake pant hem. It's all in the round, and I'll show you. I know it's kind of close. I'll show you it up far away in just a second. Not far away, but so you get the idea. Anyway, so there's one thing that I want to talk to you about that I haven't talked to you about with this machine, and I wanted to wait before we got to the hems, because there's something called, you'll hear this a lot in home sewing circles, is the free arm sewing. And what that is, I'm going to push the machine back, and I'm going to pull the camera back to look at the bottom here of this machine. Well, the base of the machine anyway. Let me focus here. So this is the bed of the machine. Of course, this is the throat plate, as I've talked to you about, that I've mentioned before when we were talking about the markings up here. So if you look at the side of this machine, it's pretty wide, and when you're doing cuffs or pant hems or trying to get into something that is cylindrical, you can't really do that hem. You can't really put this in here. Of course, if you have a flatbed machine like an industrial machine, you would work inside this cylinder, but sometimes that can be kind of difficult to work with. So on a lot of home machines, there's a small part here in the front that comes off, and it actually has an arm where you can slip the cylinder of the garment in to the machine. And there's a little arrow right here. Let me bring that up here so you can see this arrow right there. That means this part comes off. Now, it doesn't make a huge difference, but now it's hard to push it this way. So what I do is right under here, if you feel under here, there's a little nook there. Just pull it forward and it comes right off, okay? So what that does is it gives you this arm here where you can put the circle of the pant in. I guess they would call this the cylinder. And then you can put the hem in, and it works. You can sew around like that. So that's what we're going to do for this practical use of the blind hem. And we're going to do that with the knit as well. So I'm going to keep this about right here, so you can see it going around in the sun. So you won't really be able to see up close here what's going on, but after I get done, I will show you. I have this all set to go, and this time I did not overlock this edge. I will unpin this here because I'm going to start there. What I did is, again, I've interfaced the hem allowance, and then I put my 1/4 inch line, as I've mentioned before, right here, and that's where the fold of the pant is going to go. And that fold of the pant, again, I'm going to put it right in this slit of the foot. And whoops, I don't have my machine set on number 12. That's the woven blind hem. You can see I've got it set up to 12 right now, right here. And focus right there and up to that notch. Okay, and I'll come back down here so you can see that sewing. Okay, so I'm going to actually start on this side of the seam allowance and go over the seam allowance. There's a lot of thickness here, so I wouldn't suggest starting here, so that's why I'm going to start here. So I'm going to put this into the cylinder, and I'm going to get things lined up, and I'm not going to backstitch. I'm going to stitch over this for about an inch when I come back. So I can see this lined up here, and I'll kind of try to hold my hands back here. Since this is a woven and it's muslin, it has enough body to where it will kind of fold and stay there. So I'm going to get this started. Where's my, whoops, I hit something there. My foot pedal. Okay, so I'm going to get started here. Take these pins out, and I'm going to kind of hold this down, try to keep that flat as it goes through the machine. Okay, and then I'm just going to keep my eye on making sure this folded part goes right into that slit on the presser foot. And just take the pins out. Now, of course, you will have to practice this to find your sweet spot as far as where that needle ends up on the folded edge. But you know, if you grab more, then it could be a design detail. If you're using a contrasting thread, you can see this is coming right around the cylinder of this machine. I'm coming up here. I'm going to clip these threads off before I get there. Okay. And that's probably good. I'm going to bring this needle all the way up, and then I will take it out of here, cut those threads. So this is what it looks like. Looks like I did pretty good. All right, so I'm going to trim this thread off. Let's just turn it around really quick. So this is what it looks like on the other side. And look at that. I didn't, there's something here with the tension. I still have my tension on 3.5. I think it was fine with the knit, but I think maybe I needed a little bit more tension. You see what's going on here? So I think I need to switch it back to 4. I'm not going to worry about that for right now. I think I'm switching that back to 4, but it was still on the 3.5 as I worked with another demonstration for you. So I'm going to push this back here, put this up here, and let me bring the camera in a little bit closer, because now we can turn this face side out. So now this is the face side of the garment, and all we need to do is fold this hem back down and then just kind of pull that. See, there's this, it kind of leaves this, it does leave a little bit of a ridge. You just need to pull the fabric and then, of course, flatten the hem allowance. Oops. Okay. And so this would be our pant hem. And this is the front. This would be the front. Now, of course, if you had a matching thread color with your pant, you probably might not even see that detail. If you were working with a heavier wool, you probably wouldn't even see these stitches at all. You just have to make sure that you get those stitches caught really closely here. You see how tiny that is? I'll show you that. And then if we look right at the reverse side of that one, so it looks so tiny on the other side, but this is how much you would see on the outside. Okay, just so you understand that. All right. So that looks pretty good. So now just one thing about this underside, I did not do the overlock here, and you see you get a few threads here. So I might, if you don't have an overlocker, you might just turn this over 1/8 of an inch and stitch it down, and then draw your 1/4 inch line and then stitch, and then that way you would have a clean edge on this side. Okay? And so there you have it, your blind stitches. Okay, so we have completed working with the blind hem stitch number 12, and just for your reference, so we have the long straight piece, right? And you can see, as I mentioned before, these stitches here, and I don't think you can see that the way the lighting is, you did see a little before, it can be kind of inconsistent. You have to just be very good about folding the edge of fabric and making sure that that stitch catches the fabric the same way every time. So this is the straight piece of fabric, and of course this is the pseudo pant leg with, of course, the overcast stitch to finish the seam allowance, and then I also compared it to the zigzag stitch. Now I am going to put these into the notebook that I've been building as we go along, but I'm not going to tape them. And what I have here is I have the cardstock, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. Can I see it here? I don't know if you're going to be able to read what I've put there, but it reads here, blind hem stitch number 12, and then in parentheses I put overcast number 15 and zigzag number 5B. And if you remember from the satin stitch, the zigzag and satin stitch video, that the 3 stitches here, I'll turn this back around, on number 5 are your satin stitches, and there are 3 stitches included in that number 5, and I labeled them A, B, and C. And then of course I put the Brother Sewing Machine LX3817 because I have other machines here in my studio, so I wanted to make sure that I knew what stitches of the machine was for this. So I'm not going to tape these to the cardstock. I'm just going to go ahead and put it here into my protector here, my clear sleeve, and then I will just carefully fold and then slide them in. Okay, just like that. Oops, I need to turn this around. So I'm going to turn this around so it's out here on the edge, so when I open the notebook I can actually see what this page is. Okay, so I just kind of drop them in here like this and put it into my notebook. So if you've come into this video and you're not sure what exactly I'm doing here, I have a whole playlist based on the Brother Sewing Machine LX3817, a whole playlist of how to use this machine, the different parts of the machine, and we practice using all of the different stitches that it offers. So if you're interested, go ahead and look back in the playlist and you will find out all about this machine. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I ask that you do. If you hit the notification bell, you'll find out whenever I upload a new video. So thank you so much for watching, and be well.